The cargo ship's doors hissed open with a sound that made Chief Researcher Nala's skin crawl. She had seen many specimens arrive at Research Station Omega-7 over her career, but never anything from the recently discovered planet called Earth. The shipping manifest listed 2 items, one Mellivora capensis and one Homo sapiens juvenile. Nala adjusted her scanner and watched as the transport crew wheeled out 2 containment units. The first was a standard biocage, heavily reinforced with what looked like fresh welding marks. Inside, a black and white creature about the size of a small dog paced back and forth. Its movements were odd, not the frantic energy of a frightened animal, but something more calculating. The second container held a small human child, maybe 12 Earth years old according to the files. The boy sat quietly in the corner of his transparent holding cell, watching everything with bright blue eyes. His brown hair was messy, and he wore simple Earth clothes that looked too big for him. Commander Reth approached the containers with his usual swagger. He was the kind of alien who believed the universe owed him respect simply because he existed. His purple skin gleamed under the station lights as he examined their new arrivals. "So these are the legendary aggressive species of Earth," Reth said, tapping the glass of the boy's container. The child looked up at him without fear, which surprised Nala. Most specimens showed some level of stress when first arriving. The smaller one is called a honey badger, Nala read from her tablet. Reports indicate extreme aggression, problem-solving abilities, and resistance to conventional containment methods. The human child was acquired from the same region. Our intelligence suggests humans form pack bonds with other Earth species. Reth laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Pack bonds? Look at them. The furry one is barely bigger than my foot, and the human is just a scared little creature. Our conditioning protocols will have them ready for military deployment within 6 weeks." The transport supervisor, a nervous-looking alien with too many eyes, stepped forward. "Sir, I should mention that we had some difficulties during transport." "What kind of difficulties?" Nala asked. "Well, the honey badger escaped its original container 3 times. Each time it used a different method. First, it somehow manipulated the lock mechanism. Then it chewed through a reinforced wall panel. The 3rd time..." The supervisor paused, looking embarrassed. "The 3rd time it convinced our ship's cleaning drones to help it," Commander Reth waved dismissively. "Transport containers are not designed for containment. Our facilities here are built to hold creatures far more dangerous than anything Earth can produce." As if responding to his words, the honey badger suddenly stopped pacing and looked directly at Reth. Its black eyes seemed to study him for a long moment before it turned away, apparently losing interest. The human boy, who had been silent until now, spoke up. His voice was small but clear. "His name is Badger." "It speaks," Reth said with amusement. "How convenient. What is your name, little human?" "Sam," the boy replied. "And he doesn't like being called it." Nala made a note on her tablet. The human was already showing protective behavior toward the other specimen. This could be useful for their research, or it could complicate things. "Take them to processing level 7, Reth ordered. "Begin standard evaluation procedures tomorrow. I want full behavioral assessments, intelligence testing, and aggression measurements. The Hegemony High Command is expecting results from this project." As the transport crew began moving the containers toward the processing center, Nala noticed something odd. The honey badger had positioned itself at the front of its cage, facing the direction they were moving. It wasn't just being transported. It was observing the route, memorizing the turns and doorways. The human child, Sam, was doing the same thing. His head turned to track each security camera, each access panel, each intersection they passed. For a scared little creature, he seemed remarkably interested in the station's layout. "Commander," Nala said quietly, "perhaps we should review the transport difficulties more carefully. If these specimens are as problematic as the supervisor suggests..." "Nonsense," Reth interrupted. "We have successfully conditioned specimens from 47 different worlds. A small Earth mammal and a juvenile human will present no challenges we cannot handle." They reached processing level 7, a sterile white area filled with examination equipment and monitoring devices. The containers were placed in separate but adjacent holding cells, each equipped with the most advanced security systems the station could provide. As the transport crew departed, Nala activated the holding cell monitoring systems. Immediately, dozens of screens came to life, showing every angle of both specimens' new homes. The honey badger walked the perimeter of its cell once, then sat down in the center and appeared to go to sleep. Sam explored his cell more thoroughly, testing the walls and examining the food and water dispensers. He moved like someone who was used to figuring out how things worked. "Begin observation logs," Nala commanded the computer system. "Record all behaviors for analysis." Over the next several hours, both specimens seemed to settle into their new environment. The honey badger slept, ate the provided food, and used the waste facilities without incident. Sam did the same, though he spent more time examining his surroundings. It wasn't until the station's night cycle that things became interesting. Nala was reviewing the day's recordings when an alarm chimed softly. One of the monitoring screens showed Sam standing at the front of his cell, making small gestures with his hands. At first she thought he was just fidgeting, but then she noticed the pattern. In the adjacent cell, the honey badger was awake and watching Sam intently. Every few seconds it would move to a different position in its cell, as if responding to the boy's gestures. "Computer, are the specimens communicating?" Nala asked. "No verbal communication detected," the computer replied. "However, there are patterns in their movements that suggest intentional signaling." Nala frowned. She had expected some level of pack-bonding behavior, but this seemed more sophisticated than simple social comfort. The human child was teaching the honey badger something, or perhaps learning from it. She made another note in her files. Subjects show immediate communication establishment. Recommend monitoring for coordinated behavior. As she watched, Sam sat down near the wall that separated his cell from the honey badger's. The animal moved to the corresponding position on its side. They remained like that for the rest of the night cycle, close but separated. Two Earth creatures far from home. Nala had studied hundreds of species over her career. She knew the signs of simple pack bonding, territorial behavior, and stress responses. What she was seeing here felt different. These two weren't just companions, they were already planning something. The thought should have worried her more than it did. 3 weeks into the conditioning program, Senior Technician Brix was seriously considering a career change. Maybe farming on one of the peaceful agricultural worlds would be better than dealing with these impossible Earth creatures. The morning started like every other morning since the specimens arrived. Brix entered Laboratory Wing C expecting to find the honey badger, designated Subject B47, in its reinforced containment unit. Instead, he found a hole in the wall roughly the shape of a honey badger, and Subject B47 sitting calmly in the middle of the laboratory, eating what remained of a very expensive piece of scanning equipment. "How?" Brix asked the empty air. "How does it keep doing this?" This was the 18th escape in 3 weeks. Each time, the honey badger used a completely different method. It had picked electronic locks chewed through metal walls, somehow convinced maintenance robots to open doors, and once, incredibly, used a complex series of ricochets to bounce a food pellet off several surfaces and hit the emergency release button. The human child, Sam always claimed he had no idea how the honey badger escaped. He would sit in his own cell looking innocent while chaos erupted around them. But Brix was beginning to suspect the truth was more complicated. "Computer, show me last night's security footage," Brix said, stepping carefully around the honey badger. The animal looked up at him with what could only be described as smugness before returning to its breakfast of destroyed electronics. The footage showed Sam's cell from multiple angles. Around midnight, the boy had begun making those strange hand gestures again. But this time, Brix noticed something the automated systems had missed. Sam wasn't just moving his hands randomly. He was pointing to specific spots on his cell wall, then to corresponding spots on the honey badger's containment area. "Computer, analyze the pattern of the human's hand movements from last night." After a few seconds, the computer responded, "Hand movements correspond to structural stress points in Subject B47's containment unit. Probability of intentional instruction, 94.7%. Brix felt his stomach drop. The human child was teaching the honey badger where to attack the walls for maximum effect. A 12-year-old was outthinking their best security engineers. The door to the laboratory slid open, and Chief Researcher Nala entered, looking as frustrated as Brix felt. Her usually perfect appearance was disheveled, and her tablet showed what looked like endless lists of damage reports. "Status report," she said, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Subject B47 has escaped again," Brix reported. This time it appears to have consumed approximately 30,000 credits worth of neural conditioning equipment. Nala closed her eyes and rubbed her temples. Commander Reth is not going to be pleased. The project budget has already tripled and we haven't made any progress with the actual conditioning protocols. As if summoned by the mention of his name, Commander Reth's voice boomed over the intercom system. All senior staff to conference room Alpha immediately. We need to discuss the Earth specimen situation. Brix looked at the honey badger, which had finished eating the scanner, and was now examining a wall panel with obvious interest. Should we secure subject B47 first? With what? Nala asked. We've tried everything. Standard containment, reinforced containment, energy barriers, even that experimental gravity well system. Nothing holds it for more than 6 hours. They left the honey badger in the destroyed laboratory and hurried to the conference room. Commander Reth was pacing behind the main table, his purple skin darker than usual, always a bad sign. Explain to me, Reth said without preamble, how 2 primitive Earth creatures have managed to cost us more than our last 3 research projects combined. Nala activated her tablet and began reading from her reports. The honey badger has escaped 18 times, causing approximately 400,000 credits in damage. Each escape method is unique, suggesting advanced problem-solving capabilities far beyond our initial assessments. And the human child? Sam appears cooperative during testing, but we suspect he's been providing assistance to subject B47. Our conditioning protocols aren't working on either specimen. The neural mapping technology can't establish stable patterns with the human brain. It's too chaotic and unpredictable. And the honey badger seems completely immune to behavioral conditioning. Reth slammed his fist on the table. These are animals from a primitive world. How can they be outsmarting technology that has successfully conditioned specimens from 47 other planets? Before anyone could answer, an alarm began blaring throughout the station. The intercom crackled to life. Security breach in Laboratory Wing C. All personnel evacuate immediately. Repeat, all personnel evacuate Laboratory Wing C. Through the conference room's windows, they could see the laboratory wing in the distance. Smoke was pouring from several windows and emergency lights were flashing. As they watched, a section of the exterior wall simply fell away, revealing the honey badger standing in the opening like it was the most natural thing in the world. That's impossible, Brix whispered. The structural integrity of that wall should withstand direct plasma cannon fire. The honey badger looked around, apparently deciding which direction to explore next. It chose left and disappeared from view, heading toward the station's main power grid. Reth's communicator buzzed. He answered it with visible reluctance. Yes? Sir, this is Engineering Chief Koro. Whatever that creature is doing down here, it's causing massive system failures. It somehow got into the primary power distribution center and is... Well, sir, it appears to be redecorating. Redecorating? It's rearranging the power conduits, sir. I don't understand how it knows which ones to move, but it's actually improving the efficiency of our power grid, while simultaneously making it impossible for us to access the emergency shutdown controls. The lights in the conference room flickered, went out completely for a moment, then came back on brighter than before. Sir, Koro continued, I hate to say this, but I think the creature understands our power systems better than we do. These modifications would take our best engineers weeks to plan, and it's doing them in real time. Commander Reth's skin had turned almost black with rage. Find it and contain it immediately. About that, sir. We can't actually get into the power center anymore. The creature has somehow locked us out using our own security systems. And sir, there's something else. We're picking up communication signals from the human child's cell. Simple pattern bursts, but they seem to be coordinated with the honey badger's activities. Nala looked at her tablet, which was now showing real-time updates from Sam's cell. The boy was sitting calmly, but his hand movements were definitely following a pattern. Every few seconds he would make a specific gesture, and moments later they would hear a new sound from the direction of the power center. They're working together, she said quietly. The human is providing guidance and the honey badger is implementing whatever plan they've developed. Reth stared at the reports on his screen, watching their budget climb higher and higher as damage reports flooded in. How is this possible? They're just animals. Maybe, Nala said thoughtfully. That's our problem. We keep thinking of them as just animals, but what if there's something else entirely? What if Earth produces species that don't fit our standard categories? The power flickered again, and this time when it came back on, the station's air recycling system was running noticeably quieter and more efficiently. Somewhere in the depths of the station, a honey badger was improving their life support systems while simultaneously making it impossible for them to regain control of their own facility. Brix looked out the window toward Sam's cell. The boy was still making his careful hand signals, apparently giving instructions to a creature that was somewhere else entirely, doing things that should have been impossible. "Sir," Brix said quietly, "I think we need to consider the possibility that we're not training these specimens. They're training us." Dr. Voss had earned her reputation as the galaxy's leading expert in behavioral conditioning by never backing down from a challenge. She had successfully trained creatures that most people considered impossible to work with: energy beings from the Void Nebula, hive mind insects from the Crystal Worlds, even the notoriously stubborn rock-eaters from Granite Prime. But standing in the ruins of what used to be Research Station Omega-7's most advanced laboratory, she was beginning to wonder if Earth creatures were simply beyond the laws of normal psychology. "Show me the damage assessment again," she said to junior researcher Pip, who was nervously clutching a tablet that kept updating with new cost calculations. 2 million credits in the past month, Pip reported. The honey badger has now escaped from 43 different containment systems, including several that were supposedly theoretically impossible to breach. And the human child? What about the human child? Pip scrolled through his files. Sam's test scores are unlike anything we've seen. His pattern recognition abilities are off the charts, but not in the way we expect. Instead of following logical sequences, he seems to find connections that our computers can't even calculate. Yesterday's puzzle that stumped our AI systems? He solved it in 12 minutes. Dr. Voss nodded grimly. She had reviewed the recordings herself. The boy didn't solve problems the way other species did. He seemed to understand systems on a level that bypassed normal logical processes entirely. And they're still communicating? Constantly. We separated them to different levels of the station, but it doesn't matter. Sam makes his hand signals and somehow the honey badger receives the information. We don't understand the mechanism. The truth was worse than Pip knew. Dr. Voss had brought in specialists from across the galaxy, telepathy experts, communication theorists, even mystics who claimed to understand impossible phenomena. None of them could explain how a human child was coordinating activities with a creature that was currently 17 levels away and supposedly completely isolated. Commander Reth entered the destroyed laboratory with his usual dramatic flair, but Dr. Voss could see the stress lines around his eyes. The project was supposed to have been his ticket to promotion. Instead, it was becoming a career-ending disaster. "Status report, Dr. Voss," Reth demanded. "The subjects continue to resist all conditioning attempts," she replied. "However, I have a new theory about why our standard protocols are failing." "I'm listening." Dr. Voss activated a holographic display showing brain scans from various species. "Every creature we've successfully conditioned has predictable neural patterns. Their brains follow logical pathways that our technology can map and influence. But look at this." She highlighted Sam's brain scan. The neural activity looked like a constantly shifting storm of connections, with patterns that seemed to change even as they watched. The human brain doesn't follow standard patterns. It's constantly creating new pathways, adapting, evolving. Our conditioning technology can't establish a stable target because there is no stable target. And the honey badger? Even stranger. Its brain is much smaller, but the neural density is incredible. And here's the interesting part. When we scan both subjects simultaneously, their brain activities show synchronized patterns despite being physically separated. Reth studied the scans with growing frustration. "You're telling me these two creatures have somehow developed a mental connection that defies known science?" "I'm telling you that Earth species might operate on principles we don't understand. And sir, there's something else. The honey badger isn't just escaping randomly anymore. It's exploring the station systematically, learning our technology." As if to emphasize her point, an alarm began sounding from the station's communication center. Through the intercom came the panicked voice of Communications Officer Dell. "This is the comm center. The honey badger is in here and it's operating our equipment." Dr. Voss and Reth rushed to the communication center, followed by Pip and several security officers. What they found defied explanation. The honey badger was standing on the main console, using its claws to manipulate controls with surprising precision, On the screens around the room, various station systems were displaying information that should have been classified. How long has it been in here? Reth demanded. About 10 minutes, Dell reported. It bypassed 3 security checkpoints to get here. But sir, that's not the strangest part. Look at what it's accessed. The main screen showed a detailed schematic of the station's layout, complete with security protocols, maintenance schedules, and personnel assignments. The Honey Badger had somehow navigated their database system and compiled a comprehensive intelligence report. It's been studying us, Dr. Voss said quietly, learning our weaknesses, our schedules, our capabilities. The Honey Badger looked up at them with what could only be described as satisfaction, then calmly walked to the ventilation grate in the corner of the room. With practiced ease, it removed the grate and disappeared into the air duct system. Security track that creature, Reth ordered. Sir, we've been trying to track it for weeks, the security chief replied. It knows our sensor grid better than we do. Half the time it's moving through areas we didn't even know existed. Back in his cell, Sam was drawing on the walls with a piece of food. At first glance, it looked like random scribbles, but Dr. Voss recognized some of the patterns. They matched the station schematics the Honey Badger had just accessed. Computer, analyze the drawings in the human cell, she commanded. Drawings appear to be architectural modifications, the computer reported. The designs would significantly improve station efficiency while creating numerous security vulnerabilities. Dr. Voss felt a chill run down her spine. Security vulnerabilities? The proposed modifications would create a network of hidden pathways, accessible only to small creatures, while simultaneously improving power flow and life support efficiency. He's not just drawing, she whispered. He's designing. The boy is redesigning our entire station. Reth grabbed her arm. What are you saying? I'm saying we've made a terrible mistake. We thought we were studying primitive creatures, but they've been studying us. The Honey Badger's escape, Sam's test performances, even the damage they've caused. It's all been research. They're learning everything about our technology, our psychology, our weaknesses. As if to confirm her fears, the lights flickered and suddenly every screen in the communication center displayed the same message in perfectly formatted galactic standard text. Hello, we would like to negotiate. The message was signed with a small drawing of a honey badger and a human child shaking hands. Commander Reth stared at the screen in disbelief. They learned to write in our language? No, sir, Dell said, checking his equipment. They hacked our translation software and used it to compose the message. And sir, they sent this through communication channels I didn't even know we had. Dr. Voss looked around the room at the faces of her colleagues. Every single one of them showed the same expression. The dawning realization that they were no longer the ones in control of this situation. What do you think they want to negotiate? Pip asked nervously. Before anyone could answer, the honey badger's head appeared in the ventilation grate above them. It looked down at the assembled aliens with obvious intelligence, then disappeared again. A moment later, another message appeared on the screens. Better food for everyone. Also, please fix the temperature in Section C. It's too cold for proper thinking. Dr. Voss couldn't help but laugh. Here they were, trying to turn Earth creatures into weapons, and the creatures were more concerned with improving the living conditions for everyone on the station. Sir, she said to Commander Reth, I think we need to seriously reconsider what we're dealing with here. These aren't just animals. They're not even just intelligent creatures. They're something entirely new. Admiral Kresh had seen combat on 17 different worlds and commanded fleets that could crack planets. But nothing in her experience had prepared her for the emergency briefing she was now attending via holographic transmission from Hegemony Command. Let me understand this correctly, she said, her voice cutting through the static. A research station with a budget equivalent to 3 planetary invasion campaigns has been compromised. By a small mammal and a juvenile from a primitive world? Commander Reth shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His once pristine uniform was wrinkled and his skin had taken on a grayish tint that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. Admiral, the situation is more complex than the initial reports suggest. The situation, said Finance Minister Grell from his golden throne on the capital world, is that you have somehow managed to spend 8 million credits on a project that was supposed to cost 200,000. Our accountants are demanding explanations. Dr. Voss leaned forward, her tablet showing an endless scroll of damage reports. Honored Minister, the subjects have exceeded all projected parameters. Their capabilities are unlike anything in our databases. They're animals. Finance Minister Grell's four eyes bulged with indignation. How much damage can animals possibly cause? As if responding to his question, the lights in the conference room flickered and the station's intercom system crackled to life. Instead of the usual automated announcements, they heard what sounded like construction work, hammering, drilling, and the occasional satisfied grunt that could only come from a honey badger. That would be Subject B-47 improving our waste management system, Reth explained wearily. It's been working on infrastructure upgrades for the past week. Upgrades? Admiral Kresh raised an eyebrow. Unauthorized improvements to station efficiency, Dr. Voss clarified. The creature has somehow enhanced our power grid, optimized our air recycling, and created a more efficient water distribution network. Our life support systems are now running at 127% efficiency. That should be impossible, Admiral Kresh said. Many things should be impossible, Reth replied. Yet here we are. The holographic projector suddenly displayed a new image. Security Chief Borg looking harried and exhausted. Commander, we have a situation in Storage Bay 7. What now? Reth asked, though his tone suggested he already dreaded the answer. The honey badger has gotten into our equipment storage and appears to be building something. We're not sure what, but it's using parts from 17 different systems. Has it breached containment again? Sir, we stopped trying to contain it last week. It can escape from literally anything we've built. Now we just follow it around and try to minimize property damage. Finance Minister Grell's face had turned an alarming shade of purple. You stopped trying to contain your test subjects? Honored Minister, Dr. Voss said carefully. The honey badger has demonstrated the ability to escape from every containment system we've tried. Quantum locks, energy barriers, even a prototype temporal stasis field. It simply treats each new barrier as a puzzle to solve. And the human child. Sam remains in his cell voluntarily, Reth reported. But we've discovered that his cooperation is conditional. Conditional how? Dr. Voss activated her tablet and showed them recordings from Sam's cell. The boy was sitting calmly, but on the walls around him were intricate drawings that looked like engineering blueprints. He's designed improvements for our defensive systems, our navigation computers, and our food production facilities. When we asked him about the drawings, he said he was bored and thought he'd help us fix some problems he'd noticed. Admiral Kresh studied the blueprints. Even through the holographic display, she could see that they were sophisticated, beyond anything a primitive world should have been able to produce. Have you tested these designs? We implemented his food production improvements, Reth admitted. Efficiency increased by 340%, and the taste of replicated meals improved dramatically. Our crew morale has never been higher. A 12-year-old primitive improved your replication technology? Sir, we're beginning to suspect that Earth creatures don't fit standard classification categories. Their intelligence manifests in ways our testing protocols weren't designed to measure. Finance Minister Grell was scrolling through budget reports on his own display. 8 million credits. 8 million. Do you understand what that money could have purchased? We could have equipped an entire battle fleet. About that, Security Chief Borg interrupted. Sir, the honey badger has finished whatever it was building in Storage Bay 7. It's probably easier if you just see it. The display switched to show Storage Bay 7. In the center of the bay stood what looked like a small spacecraft, roughly the size of a shuttle, but with design elements that didn't match any known technology. What is that? Admiral Kresh demanded. We're not entirely sure, Borg replied. It appears to be functional, but the design incorporates principles we don't recognize. The power source alone is generating more energy than should be possible from its size. Dr. Voss was studying her scanner readings. The power signature is incredibly clean. No waste energy, no harmful radiation. And the propulsion system... She paused, checking her readings again. This is impossible, but the readings suggest it could achieve faster than light travel without using conventional jump drives. A honey badger built a starship? Finance Minister Grell's voice had risen to a squeak. It appears so, yes. Admiral Kresh was quiet for a long moment, studying the strange craft. Dr. Voss, in your professional opinion, what are we dealing with here? Admiral, I believe we're dealing with species that represent a completely different approach to intelligence and technology. They don't think like us, they don't solve problems like us, and they don't seem to be limited by the same constraints that affect other species. Are they dangerous? They could be. The honey badger has demonstrated the ability to access any system on this station, And Sam has shown he can understand and improve our technology faster than our best engineers, if they wanted to cause serious damage. She was interrupted by a gentle chime from the communication system. A message appeared on all screens simultaneously. "We would like to go home now, please. Thank you for your hospitality. But Earth food is better. Also, your gravity is too heavy. P.S. We fixed your communications array." "You're welcome." Salmon Badger Commander Reth stared at the message. "They fixed our communications array?" Communications Officer Dell's voice came over the intercom. "Sir, I can confirm that our long-range communications are now operating at unprecedented efficiency. We're receiving signals from sectors that were previously beyond our range." Admiral Kresh was quiet for another moment. "Commander Reth, what was the original purpose of this project?" "To develop Earth creatures as biological weapons for the hegemony. And what have you actually accomplished?" Reth looked around the room at his exhausted staff, then at the budget reports showing costs that had spiraled completely out of control. "We've learned that Earth creatures are far more dangerous than we initially calculated, but not in the way we expected." "Dangerous how?" Dr. Voss answered for him. "They're dangerous because they're better than us. At everything. They solve our problems, improve our technology, and do it all while remaining completely friendly and cooperative. Admiral, if there are more creatures like this on Earth..." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood the implications. Earth wasn't a source of biological weapons. Earth was a planet full of beings that could make the entire hegemony obsolete, simply by being themselves. Finance Minister Grell was still staring at the budget reports. 8 million credits, he whispered. "And they want to go home?" Emergency Director Thek had dealt with space pirate raids, reactor meltdowns, and even a diplomatic incident involving sentient gas clouds, but she had never been called to handle a complete institutional breakdown caused by excessive helpfulness. Yet here she was, reviewing reports that defied every principle of crisis management she had ever learned. The trouble had started when High Command authorized the use of experimental mind control technology on the Earth specimens. The orders came directly from the Supreme Council, who were growing impatient with the project's costs and lack of results. "Just scan their brains and reprogram them," the orders had read. How difficult can it be? Dr. Voss had tried to explain why this was a terrible idea, but no one listened to warnings about creatures that had already exceeded every prediction. The mind control device was the most advanced piece of neural manipulation technology in the galaxy, capable of completely rewriting the thoughts and behaviors of any species. When they activated it on Sam, the results were immediate and catastrophic. The boy had been sitting quietly in his cell when the scanning beams engaged. For exactly 3.7 seconds, the machine attempted to map his neural patterns. Then every computer system in a 12-level radius crashed simultaneously. Emergency Director Thek was studying the technical reports when Chief Engineer Kayla burst into her temporary command center, his 6 arms waving frantically. "Director, we've lost all electronic systems in the central hub," Kayla reported. "Locks, monitors, life support regulation, gravity control, everything. The computer network is completely fried." "What caused the failure?" "The human's brain," Kayla said, still sounding disbelieving. When the mind control device tried to scan his neural patterns, the feedback loop was so complex it overwhelmed our entire computing infrastructure. Thek looked at the technical readouts. "How is that possible?" "The human brain apparently processes information in ways that our computers literally cannot comprehend. When they tried to map his thought patterns, it was like trying to download an entire galaxy into a pocket calculator." Through the command center's windows, Thek could see chaos spreading throughout the station. With the electronic locks disabled, doors were opening randomly. With the monitoring systems down, they had no idea where anyone was. And with the gravity control offline, several sections were experiencing unpredictable gravitational fluctuations. "Status of the test subjects?" Thek asked. "That's where things get interesting," Kayla replied. "The moment the computers crashed, every single containment cell in the facility opened. We currently have specimens from 47 different worlds wandering freely through the station." "And the Earth creatures?" Sam walked out of his cell, found the honey badger, and they began organizing the other specimens. "They're not escaping, Director. They're coordinating a station-wide rescue operation." Thek activated her personal communicator, one of the few electronic devices still functioning. "Security Chief Borg report. Director, the situation is..." Borg paused, searching for words. The escaped specimens aren't attacking anyone. The Earth creatures have somehow convinced them all to work together to fix the station's problems. Fix them how? Well, the methane-breathing creatures from Swamp World are helping repair the air recycling systems. The rock eaters from Granite Prime are reinforcing damaged structural supports, and the energy beings from the Void Nebula are somehow restarting our power grid manually. Thek stared at her communicator. They're helping us? Yes, Director. The honey badger seems to be supervising the technical work, while the human child is handling logistics and communication. They've organized the most efficient repair operation I've ever seen. Dr. Voss entered the command center carrying a portable scanner. Director, I've been monitoring the situation from the observation deck. What we're seeing is unprecedented. Explain. The Earth creatures aren't just organizing the other specimens, they're teaching them to cooperate. Species that are naturally hostile to each other are working side by side. A hive-mind insect swarm is coordinating with individualistic predators. Creatures that communicate through pheromones are somehow sharing information with beings that exist as pure energy. How is that possible? Sam seems to understand each species' communication methods intuitively. He's acting as a universal translator not just for language but for entire ways of thinking. And the honey badger. Dr. Voss activated her scanner and showed them the readings. The honey badger is simultaneously coordinating 17 different repair operations across 12 levels of the station. It's keeping track of resource allocation, work schedules, and safety protocols for 47 different species with completely different needs and capabilities. Thek looked at the readings in disbelief. A small mammal is running a multi-species engineering project? A small mammal is running the most efficient multi-species engineering project I've ever seen. They've accomplished more in 6 hours than our regular maintenance crews manage in 6 months. A new voice came over the intercom. Sam's voice, speaking in perfectly clear galactic standard. Hello, this is Sam. We've finished repairing the main computer systems, but we left the containment controls offline on purpose. Everyone seems much happier when they can move around freely. Also, we fixed the food replicators in Section G. They were making everything taste like recycled metal. Chief Engineer Kayla was staring at his readouts in amazement. Director, the repairs they've made, they're not just fixing our systems, they're improving them. Power efficiency is up 200%. Life support is running smoother than it ever has. Even the waste management system is working better. Director Thek, Sam's voice continued over the intercom. We've been talking with everyone, and we think there might be some misunderstandings about this whole situation. What kind of misunderstandings? Thek asked. Well, everyone here was taken from their homes against their will, just like me and Badger. And none of us really want to be weapons. We just want to go home and be with our families. The intercom crackled, and they heard what sounded like various alien languages in the background, followed by Sam's voice again. Okay. Zrill points out that his species doesn't really have families in the way humans understand them. But he still wants to go back to his spawning pools, and the energy beings say they miss their nebula. The point is, everyone wants to go home. Dr. Voss was studying her scanner again. Director, the cooperation we're seeing down there is extraordinary. These species shouldn't be able to work together at all, but somehow the Earth creatures have found common ground that bridges completely incompatible ways of thinking. Director, Sam's voice continued, we've calculated that transporting everyone home would cost about 50,000 credits in fuel and supplies. That's much less than you've been spending on containment systems and repairs. Thek checked her budget reports. The project had now exceeded 12 million credits with no end in sight. Also, Sam added, we've made some improvements to your starship designs. The new propulsion system should cut your travel times by 70% and reduce fuel costs significantly. We left the blueprints in the main engineering database. Chief Engineer Kayla was already accessing the engineering systems. Director, these designs, they're incredible. If these calculations are correct, this could revolutionize space travel for the entire hegemony. We figured that was fair trade for the ride home, Sam said cheerfully. Badger says hello, by the way. He's busy teaching some of the other mammals how to open the really stubborn maintenance panels. Thek looked around her command center at the faces of her staff. Every single one showed the same expression, the dawning realization that 12 million credits had been spent to learn that Earth creatures were too helpful to weaponize. Sam, she said into her communicator, are you saying that you'll give us advanced technology in exchange for transportation home? "Oh, we already gave you the technology," Sam replied. "It seemed like the nice thing to do since you've been feeding us and everything. The transportation home would just be because it's the right thing to do." Dr. Voss laughed, a sound that held equal parts amazement and exhaustion. "Director, I think we've just encountered the most dangerous species in the galaxy." "Dangerous how?" "They're so helpful that they make conquest completely pointless." Supreme Chancellor Vex stood in the most expensive meeting room in the galaxy, surrounded by holograms of the hegemony's most powerful leaders, trying to explain how a research project had somehow evolved into the greatest diplomatic crisis in their recorded history. "Let me make sure I understand the situation," said Trade Minister Quinn, whose crystalline form sparkled with irritation. "A 12-year-old human and a small mammal have convinced 47 different species to cooperate in ways that our diplomatic corps has been trying to achieve for centuries?" "That's correct," Chancellor Vex replied, consulting her notes for the 100th time. "They've created what our xenosociologists are calling a trans-species cooperative collective, using communication methods we can't even identify, let alone replicate." Defense Minister Krath, a massive armored being from the war worlds, leaned forward menacingly. "And our total investment in this project now stands at 15 million credits, Finance Minister Grell whispered, his golden skin looking decidedly tarnished. "Not including the cost of the transport ships, we'll need to return all the specimens to their homeworlds. Transport ships that now incorporate Earth-designed technology that makes our entire existing fleet obsolete," added Fleet Admiral Kresh from her flagship Chancellor. Vex activated the main display, showing a detailed report from Research Station Omega-7. "The situation has progressed beyond our control. The Earth creatures haven't just organized the other specimens. They've created a functioning interspecies society that is, by every measure we can calculate, superior to our own governmental systems." "Superior how?" demanded Internal Security Director Yash. "Crime rate 0. Efficiency ratings off the charts. Happiness indicators, the highest levels ever recorded in a multi-species environment. They've solved resource allocation problems that have plagued galactic civilization for millennia." Dr. Voss appeared via hologram from the station, looking tired but oddly peaceful. "Honored leaders, I've been observing the collective for 2 weeks now. What Sam and the Honey Badger have accomplished challenges everything we thought we knew about civilization and cooperation." "Explain," Chancellor Vex ordered. "They've created a system where every individual contributes according to their natural abilities, while having their basic needs met regardless of their contribution level. The Rock Eaters handle heavy construction, the energy beings manage power distribution, the hive minds coordinate complex logistics, and the individual-minded species handle creative problem-solving. That's the basic theory behind the hegemony," Trade Minister Quinn pointed out. "Yes, but they've made it actually work," Dr. Voss replied. "There's no bureaucracy, no corruption, no inefficiency. Everyone understands their role and performs it willingly because they can see how it benefits the whole community." Defense Minister Krath's armor clanked as he shifted position. "What's their military capability?" "That's the interesting part," Dr. Voss said. "They don't have one. They've made military force irrelevant by making everyone want to participate voluntarily." Chancellor Vex felt a headache building behind her eyes. "Dr. Voss, what exactly are the Earth creatures asking for?" "Transportation home for everyone who wants it, which is most of the specimens. A few have asked to stay and continue working together. And," Dr. Voss paused, checking her notes, "they've requested that we stop taking creatures from their home worlds without permission." "They're making demands?" Internal Security Director Yash sounded outraged. "They're making suggestions," Dr. Voss corrected. Sam was very polite about it. He said they understand that we probably didn't realize how much everyone missed their homes, and that now that we know, they're sure we'll want to do the right thing. Fleet Admiral Kresh's image flickered as she accessed her ship's databases. "What about the technology they've shared? Have we verified its functionality?" "The propulsion systems have been tested and confirmed," Chief Engineer Kayla reported from the station. "Travel time to Earth is reduced from 6 months to 3 weeks. The power generation improvements could solve our energy crisis across all member worlds, and their communication technology could revolutionize trade and diplomacy." "How much would similar technology cost us to develop independently?" Finance Minister Grell asked. Kayla was quiet for a moment, running calculations. "Conservatively, 200 billion credits over 50 years, assuming we could eventually figure out the underlying principles. And they gave it to us for free? Sam said it seemed rude not to share since we'd been so hospitable, Dr. Voss replied. The honey badger apparently agrees, though its communication is more limited. Chancellor Vex looked around the room at the faces of the hegemony's leadership. Options? We could keep them, Defense Minister Krath suggested. Force them to continue developing technology for us. Sir, Dr. Voss interrupted, I should mention that they've already considered that possibility. Sam said that if anyone tries to prevent them from going home, they'll be disappointed and would probably have to figure something else out. Is that a threat? Sir, given what they've accomplished in a few weeks with no resources and no preparation, I would not want to find out what they could figure out if they were actually trying to cause problems. Trade Minister Quinn's crystalline form chimed thoughtfully. What if we offered them citizenship? Full rights, positions in our government, access to our resources? I asked Sam about that, Dr. Voss replied. He said it sounded nice, but he misses his family and wants to show them the things he's learned. He also said the honey badger has important badger business to attend to on Earth. Important badger business? Chancellor Vex asked. He wasn't specific. Fleet Admiral Kresh cleared her throat. There's another consideration. If Earth produces more creatures like these two, and if they have the technology they've shared with us, they may not remain a primitive world for long. Meaning we may want them as allies rather than as specimens. Chancellor Vex was quiet for a long moment, considering the implications. Earth was supposed to have been a source of biological weapons. Instead, they'd discovered a world that could teach them things they never knew they needed to learn. Dr. Voss, she said finally, ask Sam if he would be interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations between Earth and the hegemony. I already did, Dr. Voss replied. He said he's just a kid and that's probably something for grown-ups to decide, but he'd be happy to mention it to people when he gets home. And the honey badger? The honey badger made a sound that our translation software interpreted as, whatever Sam thinks is fine. Finance Minister Grell was running final calculations on his display. The cost of returning all specimens to their homeworlds, plus establishing diplomatic missions to each planet, would be approximately 12 million credits. Less than we've already spent on this project, Chancellor Vex noted. Yes, but the technology they've given us could generate trillions of credits in improved efficiency across all our worlds. It's the most profitable failed project in galactic history. Chancellor Vex made her decision. Authorization granted for full specimen return operations. Establish diplomatic contact with all represented worlds and... She paused, looking at the reports of everything Sam and the honey badger had accomplished. Create a new classification for Earth. Protected world. Friendly contact authorized. Formal alliance preferred. And the research project? Dr. Voss asked. Project officially terminated. Final report to read. Earth creatures unsuitable for military weaponization due to excessive helpfulness and superior technological capabilities. Recommend immediate diplomatic engagement. Dr. Voss smiled for the first time in weeks. Sam will be pleased. He's been asking when he can go home. Dr. Voss, Chancellor Vex said, in your professional opinion, what have we learned from this experience? We've learned that the most dangerous species in the galaxy aren't the ones with the biggest weapons or the most aggressive instincts. They're the ones who are so naturally cooperative and innovative that they make conquest pointless and war obsolete. Chancellor Vex nodded slowly. And what does that tell us about Earth? It tells us that Earth is either the safest planet in the galaxy to be friends with, or the most dangerous planet in the galaxy to be enemies with. And given what we've seen, I strongly recommend we choose friendship. As the meeting ended and the holograms faded away, Chancellor Vex remained in the expensive meeting room, looking out at the stars and wondering what other surprises might be, waiting on a small blue planet where honey badgers and human children could reshape galactic civilization in a matter of weeks. In the final report, which would become required reading at diplomatic academies across the galaxy, the conclusion was simple. Earth, approach with friendship, extreme caution, and very good insurance coverage. The wrench slipped again, and Sam Rivers cursed under his breath as his knuckles scraped against the rough metal pipe. Around him, the other workers at Mining Colony 7 watched with barely hidden amusement. The tall bird-like avians ruffled their feathers in what passed for laughter among their species, while the reptilian scalers hissed softly in their own version of chuckling. Perhaps the human would benefit from proper tools, chirped Trill, the lead avian engineer. Her voice carried that particular tone of condescension that Sam had grown used to over his 3 years on Kepler-9. We have molecular welders that could repair that coolant line in seconds. Sam wiped the grease from his hands on his already dirty coveralls and picked up his trusty adjustable wrench again. The thing was older than most of the aliens working here, passed down from his grandfather who had worked the oil rigs back on Earth. Its metal surface was worn smooth from decades of use, and it had never failed him yet. "This works just fine," Sam replied, his voice calm despite the growing frustration. He was a stocky man in his 50s, with gray streaking through his brown hair and laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of better times. His hands were permanently stained with engine oil and hydraulic fluid, marks of someone who fixed things the old-fashioned way. The scaler foreman, a large creature named Ridge whose scales shimmered green in the artificial light, slithered closer. "Human stubbornness is well documented," he said, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. "But surely even your species can appreciate efficiency." Sam tightened the pipe joint with 3 precise turns of his wrench, then tested the seal by hand. Perfect. No leaks, no stress fractures, and it would last for years. He had seen the fancy molecular repairs fail within months when the equipment was pushed hard. His fixes endured. "Efficiency is getting the job done right the first time," Sam said, packing his tools back into his worn leather tool bag, "not using expensive gadgets that break down when you need them most." The comment drew more amused sounds from the gathered workers. The hive minds, insectoid creatures that shared a collective consciousness, buzzed in unison, their equivalent of rolling their eyes. To them, Sam represented everything backward about individual thinking species. They could coordinate repairs across multiple sites simultaneously using their shared mental link, while this human fumbled with primitive metal tools. Colony Administrator Beth Adams approached the group, her crisp uniform a stark contrast to Sam's oil-stained work clothes. She was human too, but she had embraced the high-tech approach that dominated galactic civilization. Her personal assistant device floated beside her, recording everything for later analysis. "Rivers, I need you to look at the main ventilation system," she said, consulting the holographic display projected by her device. "The atmospheric processors are showing minor inefficiencies." "What kind of inefficiencies?" Sam asked, already mentally running through the possibilities. 0.03% deviation from optimal, Beth replied. The avian technicians ran a full diagnostic, but their equipment shows all systems functioning within normal parameters. Trill preened her silver feathers smugly. "Our scanners detect no mechanical faults. Perhaps the deviation is simply acceptable variance." Sam shook his head. 0.03% adds up over time. If the system is working harder than it should, something is causing drag somewhere. Could be dust buildup, could be a bearing going bad, could be a dozen things. The scanners would detect such problems, Ridge insisted. "Your human intuition is unreliable compared to precise measurement." "My human intuition has kept this colony running for 3 years, Sam replied mildly. He shouldered his tool bag and headed toward the ventilation access. "I'll take a look." The other workers dispersed, returning to their various tasks with the satisfied air of people who had just witnessed their daily entertainment. Sam had become something of a running joke among the alien workers. They called him the Badger behind his back, though some had started using the nickname to his face. It was meant to be mocking, a reference to his stocky build and his stubborn insistence on using primitive methods. Sam didn't mind the nickname. He had learned about honey badgers in school, back when Earth still had them in the wild. Small, tough creatures that never backed down from a fight. There were worse things to be compared to. The ventilation shaft was a tight fit, even for someone of Sam's modest height. He crawled through the metal ductwork with a penlight clenched between his teeth, feeling his way along the smooth surfaces. His hands told him things that no scanner could detect, the subtle vibrations that indicated wear, the slight temperature differences that suggested airflow problems, the almost imperceptible roughness that preceded major failures. 20 minutes in, he found it. A support strut had shifted slightly, probably during the last seismic tremor that shook the colony. The movement was tiny, maybe a quarter-inch, but it was causing one of the main air circulation fans to work at an odd angle. The fan was compensating automatically, but the extra effort was causing the efficiency loss Beth had detected. Sam pulled out his wrench and a small crowbar, wedging the strut back into proper alignment. He secured it with wire and metal brackets from his kit, creating a repair that would hold through anything short of a major earthquake. The work took him 40 minutes, and by the time he emerged from the access panel, his coveralls were covered in dust and his knees ached from crawling. Beth was waiting for him with her floating assistant, along with Trill and Ridge. They watched expectantly as Sam brushed the dust from his clothes. "Well?" Beth asked. Support strut shifted during the last tremor, Sam reported. Fan number 7 was working at a bad angle. Should be running smooth now. Beth consulted her device and her eyebrows rose. Atmospheric efficiency is back to optimal. How did you know where to look? Felt it, Sam said simply. The vibration was wrong. Ridge's scales rippled in skeptical patterns. You diagnosed a complex mechanical issue by feeling vibrations? Same way you can tell when someone is lying by tasting their scent, Sam replied. Experience. Trill ruffled her feathers dismissively. Primitive methods producing accidental success. Your human superstitions about mechanical intuition are not scientifically valid. Sam just smiled and headed back toward the maintenance bay. Let them think what they wanted. He had work to do, and the colony's systems needed someone who understood that the most important tool was not in any kit or scanner. It was the willingness to get your hands dirty and pay attention to what the machines were trying to tell you. Behind him, the aliens continued their discussion about human peculiarities, their voices fading as he walked away. Sam Rivers, the Badger, went back to his simple tools and complex problems, unaware that both would soon be tested in ways he had never imagined. The emergency alarm cut through the morning shift like a blade, its harsh tone echoing off the metal walls of Mining Colony 7. Sam looked up from the hydraulic pump he was rebuilding, oil-stained hands still gripping his wrench. In 3 years on Kepler 9, he had heard that particular alarm only twice before, and both times it had meant someone was dead. Beth Adams burst into the maintenance bay, her face pale and her usual composure cracked. Behind her came Dan Cole, the colony's security chief, a former military man whose scarred face rarely showed emotion. Today, worry lines creased his features. We have a problem, Beth said without preamble. 3 miners didn't report back from the deep shafts last night. Scalers from Ridge's crew. Sam set down his wrench and gave them his full attention. The scalers were tough, experienced miners who knew the tunnels better than anyone. They didn't just disappear. Equipment failure? Sam asked.
Cave-in?
Dan shook his head. No structural damage detected. Their personal beacons went dark simultaneously at 2300 hours. No distress signals, no communication attempts. Could be interference from the mineral deposits, Beth suggested, but her tone indicated she didn't believe it herself. Not all 3 at once, Dan replied grimly. And there's something else. He activated his portable display unit, showing grainy footage from a tunnel security camera. The image was dark, lit only by the miners' helmet lights as 3 scalar workers made their way deeper into the shaft. Everything appeared normal until the timestamp showed 22:58. Then the lights began to flicker and dance erratically. Watch carefully, Dan said, pointing at the edge of the camera's field of view. Sam squinted at the screen, then sucked in a sharp breath. Something moved in the darkness beyond the lights. Something that seemed to absorb the illumination rather than reflect it. It was there for less than a second before the camera feed cut to static. What was that? Beth whispered. I don't know, Dan admitted, but I'm organizing search teams. The avians will scout from above using their aerial capabilities, and the hive minds can coordinate multiple search patterns simultaneously. Sam frowned, thinking through the problem. The avians can't fly in those narrow tunnels, and their vision is adapted for bright light. They'll be nearly blind down there. As for the hive minds, if something is jamming communications, their shared consciousness won't work underground. What are you suggesting? Beth asked. Let me go down there, Sam said simply. I know those tunnels as well as anyone, and I don't rely on fancy equipment that can be disrupted. Dan and Beth exchanged glances. The security chief spoke first. Rivers, I appreciate the offer, but this could be dangerous. We should send trained search personnel. Your trained search personnel are adapted for conditions that don't exist down there, Sam pointed out. The scalers have heat vision, but you said their beacons went dark. That suggests whatever got them doesn't produce heat signatures. The avians need light and open space. The hive minds need clear communication channels. I need a flashlight and my wits. Beth consulted her floating assistant device, its holographic display showing colony personnel records. Sam, your file shows no formal search and rescue training. My file doesn't show a lot of things, Sam replied, shouldering his tool bag and adding a few additional items: rope, flares, and a first aid kit. But I've been crawling through dark, dangerous places fixing things since before most of these aliens ever left their home worlds. An hour later, Sam descended into the mining complex's deepest level. The elevator ride took him nearly a kilometer below the surface, past layers of extracted ore, and into the network of tunnels that honeycombed Kepler-9's crust. The air grew cooler and more humid as he descended, carrying the metallic taste of deep earth. The tunnel where the scalers had vanished stretched ahead of him like a throat, its walls lined with the smooth marks of industrial boring equipment. Sam's flashlight beam probed the darkness, revealing nothing unusual at first glance. But as he walked deeper, his experienced eye began to notice details that sophisticated scanners would miss. The dust patterns were wrong. In a tunnel that should show only the track marks of mining equipment, there were other disturbances. Long parallel scratches in the floor that suggested something large had been dragged, scuff marks on the walls at odd heights, and strangest of all, areas where the perpetual layer of mineral dust had been completely cleared away, as if something had absorbed it entirely. Sam knelt beside one of the scratch marks, running his fingers along its edge. The gouge was deep and sharp, made by something harder than the scaler's natural claws. He pulled out a small magnifying glass and examined the mark more closely in his flashlight beam. "What the hell," he muttered, seeing microscopic metal filings embedded in the rock. Whatever had made these marks was not organic. A sound echoed from deeper in the tunnel, a soft scraping like metal on stone. Sam killed his flashlight and pressed himself against the tunnel wall, listening intently. The sound came again, closer now, accompanied by something that might have been breathing if it wasn't so utterly wrong. It was too rhythmic, too mechanical, like air being processed through filters rather than lungs. Sam waited in the darkness, every sense straining. His grandfather had taught him to hunt in the deep woods of Alaska, lessons about patience and observation that served him well in his engineering career. Right now, those old skills might be the only thing keeping him alive. The sounds moved past his position, heading toward the colony's upper levels. Sam counted to 60 before turning his light back on, keeping the beam low and shielded with his hand. Whatever these things were, they were heading in the wrong direction for mere predators. They were moving toward populated areas. He found the first evidence of the missing scalers 50 meters deeper into the tunnel. Ridge's nephew, a young miner named Chip, had left his helmet behind. The device was intact but bore strange marks, smooth, circular depressions that looked almost like bite marks, except no animal Sam knew had perfectly round teeth. The helmet's recording device was still functional. Sam accessed the stored footage, watching the final minutes of Chip's shift through the miner's own eyes. The recording showed normal work until the very end, when the camera began to shake violently. In the last few frames before the feed cut out, Sam caught a glimpse of something impossible. The things in the tunnel were not animals. They moved with mechanical precision, their surfaces reflecting light in ways that suggested metal rather than flesh. But they displayed hunting behaviors, pack coordination, and what appeared to be intelligence. They had deliberately disabled the miner's equipment before striking, cutting off communications and eliminating light sources with surgical precision. Sam made his way back to the surface as quickly as caution allowed, his mind racing through the implications. The colony's defenders were preparing for the wrong kind of threat. The avians' aerial scouts were useless against underground predators. The scaler's heat vision wouldn't detect creatures that appeared to be largely mechanical. The hive mind's coordination advantages meant nothing if their targets could jam communications. When the elevator reached the surface level, Sam found Beth and Dan waiting anxiously in the control room. "What did you find?" Beth asked immediately. Sam set Chip's helmet on the desk and activated its recording playback. "We're not dealing with animals," he said grimly. "These things are intelligent, organized, and they're learning our patterns. This wasn't a random attack. It was a reconnaissance mission." Dan studied the footage, his military experience evident in how quickly he grasped the tactical implications. "You're saying they're scouts. I'm saying they're preparing for something bigger," Sam replied. "And our current defenses are designed for the wrong kind of enemy." Beth looked between them, her administrative mind struggling to process the threat assessment. "What do you recommend?" Sam thought about the scratch marks, the deliberate way the creatures had disabled equipment, and the direction they had been moving when he heard them in the tunnels. "I recommend we stop thinking like civilized beings and start thinking like prey," he said, "because that's what we are until we figure out how to fight these things on their own terms." Sam's boots clanged against the metal grating as he climbed down into the colony's main power distribution center. His flashlight beam swept across banks of humming machinery, revealing something that made his blood run cold. The thick power cables that fed electricity to the upper levels had been gnawed, not cut cleanly like sabotage, but chewed with systematic precision, leaving just enough intact to maintain power flow, while creating critical weak points. He had spent the last week mapping the creature's movements through the underground sections of Mining Colony 7, following scratches, disturbed dust patterns, and the increasingly frequent equipment failures that others attributed to normal wear. What he found painted a picture that no one wanted to believe. The things in the tunnels were not random predators. They were engineers. Sam photographed the damaged cables with his personal device, adding them to the growing collection of evidence he had gathered. Ventilation ducts with precision holes drilled at stress points, support beams scored in patterns that would cause maximum structural failure under load, communication lines severed in ways that would create dead zones in the most critical areas. Every piece of damage was carefully calculated to remain undetected by automated systems while preparing the colony for systematic collapse. These creatures understood infrastructure better than most of the alien engineers working above ground. The elevator ride to the surface gave Sam time to organize his thoughts. He had requested a meeting with the colony's leadership council, comprising representatives from each species working the mining operation. What he needed to tell them would sound like paranoid fantasy to beings who trusted their advanced technology above all else. The council chamber buzzed with conversation in multiple languages as Sam entered. Beth Adams sat at the head of the polished metal table, flanked by Dan Cole and the department heads from each species. Trill represented the avians, her silver feathers gleaming under the artificial lights. Ridge spoke for the scalers, his massive frame coiled in the specially designed chair. The hive minds had sent 3 representatives who stood perfectly synchronized, their insectoid heads tilted at identical angles. "Thank you all for coming," Beth began formally. "Sam has requested this meeting to present findings from his investigation into the recent disappearances." "Sam?" Sam stood and activated the room's holographic display, showing his collected evidence, photos of the damaged infrastructure, recordings of strange sounds in the tunnels, and seismic data that showed movement patterns too regular to be natural. "Over the past week, I've mapped deliberate damage to our critical systems," Sam began. "Power distribution, communications, structural supports, ventilation. Every system has been compromised in ways designed to cause cascading failures." Trill's feathers ruffled dismissively. "You are suggesting that primitive tunnel creatures possess engineering knowledge?" "I'm suggesting that these creatures are not primitive," Sam replied. "They understand our technology better than we understand theirs." Ridge's forked tongue flicked out to taste the air, a sign of skepticism among his species. "Our sensors detect no organized presence in the lower tunnels. Random damage from scavenging animals is not evidence of intelligence." Sam highlighted one of his photographs, showing the precisely gnawed power cables. "This isn't random. Look at the pattern. They left exactly enough connectivity to maintain power flow, while creating maximum instability. That requires understanding of electrical load distribution." One of the hive mind representatives spoke, its voice a harmony of perfectly synchronized tones. "Individual perception often creates patterns where none exist. Collective analysis reveals no systematic threat. Your collective analysis is based on sensors that these things know how to avoid," Sam countered. "They've been studying us for weeks, maybe months. They know exactly what our equipment can and cannot detect." Beth consulted her floating assistant device, its holographic display showing colony status reports. "Our defensive systems show green across all sectors. Automated security protocols detect no unauthorized presence." Sam pulled up the seismic data, showing the regular movement patterns he had tracked, because they're moving through areas our security doesn't monitor. Maintenance shafts, abandoned mining tunnels, natural cave systems that intersect with our excavations. They're using our own infrastructure against us. Dan Cole, the security chief, leaned forward with interest. His military background made him more receptive to unconventional threat assessments. What kind of numbers are we talking about? Based on the scope of the damage and the coordination required, I estimate hundreds, Sam replied. Maybe thousands. They're not just hiding from us, they're preparing for something big. The room erupted in skeptical chatter. Trill's wings spread in the avian gesture of dismissal. Hundreds of undetected creatures living beneath a surveyed mining colony? Impossible. Our mining operations have excavated these areas extensively, Ridge added. We would have encountered any significant population. Sam felt frustration building in his chest. We encountered 3 of them. They killed 3 experienced scalar miners and made it look like an equipment failure. How many more disappearances are we going to write off as accidents? Beth raised her hand for silence. Sam, I appreciate your diligence, but we need to consider the practical implications. You're asking us to allocate significant resources to defend against a threat that our technology cannot confirm exists. I'm asking you to prepare for the possibility that our technology isn't sufficient, Sam replied. These things have been studying our weaknesses for weeks. When they attack, it won't be a random assault. It will be coordinated, systematic, and designed to exploit every vulnerability they've identified. The HiveMind representatives conferred briefly in their rapid, harmonic language before one spoke. Collective security protocols are designed to detect and respond to all known threat types. Individual human intuition is not a reliable basis for defensive strategy. Sam looked around the table at faces that ranged from polite skepticism to open dismissal. Only Dan showed any signs of taking the threat seriously. But even the security chief seemed hesitant to commit resources based on one human's suspicions. What about the missing miners? Sam asked. 3 experienced workers don't just vanish. Industrial accidents occur, Ridge replied matter-of-factly. Mining is dangerous work. Their remains will likely be found during routine excavation. Their equipment was selectively disabled before they disappeared, Sam pressed. That doesn't happen in accidents. Equipment failures can cascade rapidly in dangerous environments, Trill observed. Human tendency toward conspiracy thinking is well documented. Sam realized he was fighting a losing battle. The alien leadership had too much faith in their technology and too little respect for human instincts. They would not take action based on what they saw as primitive superstition. Fine, Sam said, gathering his evidence files. But I want my concerns on record. When this goes bad, and it will go bad, I want everyone to remember that we had warning. Beth nodded diplomatically. Your concerns are noted in the official minutes. Is there anything else? Sam looked around the table one more time, seeing the same mixture of condescension and dismissal he had grown accustomed to over his years on the colony. Just one thing. When these creatures attack, your advanced technology won't save you. Your scanners can't detect them. Your communication systems can be jammed, and your automated defenses are designed for threats that follow the rules. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. The only thing standing between this colony and disaster is someone willing to get their hands dirty and fight these things on their own terms. I hope you remember that when the time comes. After Sam left, the council continued their meeting, moving on to routine administrative matters. They filed his report in the database alongside other security concerns and marked it for follow-up review in 30 days. The automated systems continued their steady monitoring, detecting nothing unusual in the tunnels below. Meanwhile, Sam returned to his workshop and began preparing for war. If the leadership wouldn't authorize defensive preparations, he would make them himself. He pulled out hand-drawn schematics of the colony's infrastructure and began marking critical points that needed protection. His tool collection expanded to include items that had nothing to do with maintenance and everything to do with survival. In the tunnels beneath the colony, the creatures Sam called engineers continued their methodical preparation. They had indeed been studying the settlement's weaknesses, and their analysis was nearly complete. Soon, very soon, they would test their knowledge against the reality of Mining Colony 7's defenses. The countdown to catastrophe had begun, and only one human understood what was coming. The ground beneath Sam's feet trembled like a living thing as he worked to secure the last of his improvised barriers across the main tunnel entrance. 3 weeks had passed since the council meeting, 3 weeks of ignored warnings and careful preparation. The seismic sensors had been registering increasing activity for days, but the colony's geological team attributed it to natural settling in the excavated areas. Sam knew better. The vibrations had a rhythm, a purpose that spoke of coordinated movement deep below. Thousands of creatures were on the move, and they were heading upward. He had used his maintenance access to quietly reinforce critical areas throughout the colony. Steel plates welded across vulnerable ventilation shafts, emergency blast doors rewired to respond to manual triggers instead of automated systems, fuel lines rerouted away from the most obvious attack vectors. Everything done during routine maintenance shifts when the alien workers paid no attention to the humans' primitive methods. The attack began at 347 hours, just before the morning shift change when the colony was at its most vulnerable. Sam was in the power distribution center, checking his hidden backup systems when the lights flickered and died. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing everything in red warning light. Then the screaming started. Sam grabbed his equipment bag and ran toward the elevator. But the car was locked down due to the power fluctuations. He took the emergency stairs 3 at a time, his aging legs protesting the sudden exertion. The stairwell echoed with sounds that made his blood freeze. The ring of metal on metal, inhuman voices raised in what might have been battle cries, and the wet sounds that meant people were dying. He emerged onto the main level to find chaos. The creatures he had been tracking for weeks had erupted from multiple access points simultaneously, pouring into the colony's central areas like a black tide. In the red emergency lighting, they looked even more nightmarish than he had imagined. They moved on 6 legs each, their bodies a disturbing blend of organic curves and mechanical angles. Metallic carapaces gleamed with an oily sheen, while exposed organic parts pulsed with internal light. Each creature was roughly the size of a large dog, but they moved with the coordinated precision of a military unit. The colony's defenders were in complete disarray. The avians designed for aerial combat in open spaces found themselves trapped in narrow corridors where their wings were useless. Their high-tech plasma weapons required clear lines of sight and sophisticated targeting systems that couldn't lock onto the creature's bizarre biomechanical signatures. The scalar's natural advantages were equally compromised. Their heat vision showed the creatures as strange cold spots with small hot zones, making targeting impossible. Their own advanced energy weapons kept missing or failing to penetrate the creature's adaptive armor. The hive minds faced the worst situation of all. Something about the creature's presence disrupted their shared consciousness, leaving the individuals isolated and confused. They stumbled around the corridors, calling out in distress as their collective identity fragmented. Sam watched a group of avian guards try to establish a defensive position near the communication center. Their plasma rifles charged with high-pitched whines, sophisticated targeting computers analyzing the approaching threats. The creatures responded by doing something impossible. They began to shift and change, their biomechanical forms adapting in real time to deflect the energy weapons. "The targeting systems can't lock on," one of the avians shrieked. "They're changing faster than our computers can compensate." Sam pulled out his grandfather's hunting rifle, a primitive weapon that used chemical propellants to fire simple metal projectiles. The creatures might be able to adapt to energy weapons and sophisticated targeting systems, but they couldn't adapt to a chunk of lead moving at high velocity. He took careful aim and squeezed the trigger. The rifle's sharp crack echoed through the corridor as one of the creatures tumbled backward, its biomechanical form sparking and twitching. The others turned toward him with what appeared to be surprise, as if they had never encountered anything so simple and brutal. "Fall back to secondary positions," Sam shouted to the avian guards. "Use the manual override corridors." "We cannot abandon our posts," Trill replied, her silver feathers now streaked with some kind of dark fluid. "Protocol requires us to maintain defensive formations." "Your protocol is getting you killed," Sam snapped, firing again and dropping another creature. "These things have studied your protocols. They know exactly how you're going to respond." More creatures poured through the access points, moving with terrifying coordination. They had indeed studied the colony's layout extensively, striking at every critical system simultaneously. The main power grid, the communication array, the atmospheric processing plant, and the water treatment facility all came under attack at the same moment. Sam watched the colony's sophisticated defenses crumble in real time. Automated security turrets swept back and forth uselessly, their sensors unable to distinguish between the creatures and the chaotic mix of energy signatures from damaged equipment. When they did manage to target something, their energy beams either missed the rapidly adapting creatures or struck colonists by mistake. The defensive force, fields that should have sealed off critical areas, flickered and failed as the creatures systematically destroyed their control nodes. Sam realized with growing horror that every defensive measure had been anticipated and countered. The creatures had spent weeks learning the colony's every weakness, and now they were exploiting that knowledge with ruthless efficiency. Beth Adams stumbled through the corridor, her pristine administrator's uniform torn and stained. Her floating assistant device sparked and died as she approached Sam's position. "The main computer core is under attack," she gasped. "They're not just destroying equipment, they're accessing our data systems." Sam felt a chill that had nothing to do with the failing life support. "They're downloading our files. Everything we know about human technology, other colonies, trade routes." Dan Cole appeared from a side corridor, his security team in full retreat. The former soldier's face was grim as he assessed the tactical situation. "Conventional weapons are useless. They adapt too quickly to anything sophisticated." "Then we stop being sophisticated," Sam replied, checking his rifle's ammunition. "I've been preparing for this." He led them toward the maintenance section, moving through routes that avoided the main corridors where the creatures were concentrating their assault. The paths he chose seemed random, but Sam had spent weeks learning every service tunnel and emergency passage in the colony. They reached his workshop to find it untouched. The creatures had focused their attack on areas they considered strategically important, ignoring the simple maintenance facility. Sam's preparations were exactly where he had left them. Manual override switches for critical systems, backup power cells that operated independently of the main grid, and weapons that required no computers or targeting systems. "This is your plan?" Dan asked, looking at the collection of simple tools and primitive weapons. "Fight biomechanical creatures with hammers and hunting rifles?" "Fight them with things they haven't studied," Sam corrected. "They've learned to counter every piece of advanced technology in this colony, but they don't understand the old ways." Through the workshop's small window, Sam could see the creatures spreading through the colony like an infection. They moved with perfect coordination, each group focusing on a specific objective while maintaining constant communication with the others. It was a textbook military operation, executed with mechanical precision. But Sam had noticed something the others missed. For all their technological sophistication, the creatures were following predictable patterns. They had studied the colony's defenses so thoroughly that they had developed rigid tactical doctrines. They expected certain responses to their attacks and had prepared counters for each anticipated move. What they hadn't prepared for was someone who refused to follow any doctrine at all. Sam picked up his rifle and checked the simple explosive charges he had placed throughout the colony's infrastructure. Not sophisticated demolitions that could be detected and disarmed, but crude devices that would bring down critical support structures through brute force. "Time to show these things what humans do when we're cornered," he said grimly. "We stop playing by the rules." Sam moved through the colony's service tunnels like a ghost, his decades of maintenance experience serving him in ways he had never imagined. While the creatures swarmed through the main corridors above, he used access routes that existed only in his memory and on hand-drawn maps that no computer system had ever recorded. The colony was dying around him. Through ventilation grates, he could see the aftermath of the creature's systematic assault. Bodies lay scattered in the corridors, both alien and the few humans who had tried to fight. The sophisticated medical bay had been stripped of its technology, leaving the wounded to tend themselves with primitive first aid. But Sam was no longer thinking like a maintenance engineer. The knowledge that had made him effective at fixing broken systems now served a darker purpose. He understood the colony's infrastructure better than anyone, and he was going to use that knowledge to turn the entire facility into a weapon. His first target was the main atmospheric processing plant. The creatures had captured it intact, obviously planning to use it for their own purposes. Sam crawled through a service tunnel that brought him directly beneath the facility's main support column. The charges he had planted weeks earlier were still in place, simple explosives that relied on chemical reactions rather than electronic triggers. Sam set off the first blast manually, using a match and a length of fuse that his grandfather might have recognized. The explosion brought down half the atmospheric plant, crushing dozens of creatures beneath tons of twisted metal and concrete. The survivors scattered in confusion, their coordinated tactics disrupted by an attack they had never anticipated. Through the chaos, Sam heard something that chilled him to the bone. The creatures were communicating, but not in any language he recognized. The sounds were a mixture of electronic tones and organic calls, suggesting they truly were biomechanical hybrids. More importantly, they were adapting to his tactics in real time. By the time Sam reached his second target, the power distribution center, the creatures had figured out that someone was using the service tunnels. Groups of them began moving toward access points, trying to cut off his escape routes. But Sam had advantages they couldn't counter. He knew every pipe, cable, and ductwork in the facility, and he had spent weeks preparing fallback positions. The power center was heavily defended, with dozens of creatures working to maintain the electrical systems they needed for their own technology. Sam watched them through a concealed observation port, studying their behavior. They moved with mechanical precision. But there was something else. A hierarchy that suggested intelligence and organization beyond mere programming. One creature was clearly directing the others, its biomechanical form larger and more complex than the rest. When it gestured with appendages that seemed part claw and part precision tool, the others responded immediately. This was their commander, and Sam realized that taking it out might disrupt their entire operation. The hunting rifle would be useless at this range, and the creatures were too alert for him to get closer undetected. But Sam had other options. He had spent years working with high-pressure hydraulic systems, and he understood the devastating power of water under extreme pressure. Sam made his way to the facility's main water distribution system, a network of pipes that carried pressurized water throughout the colony. The creatures had ignored this system, apparently considering it irrelevant to their objectives. They had made a fatal mistake. Using his simple tools, Sam began modifying the pressure release valves on the main distribution line. He removed safety mechanisms and blocked pressure relief systems, creating a condition that would have horrified any safety engineer. The water pressure began building to dangerous levels, turning the entire pipe network into a potential weapon. When Sam finally opened the modified valve, the result was catastrophic. A jet of water moving at incredible pressure burst through the wall of the power center like a cannon shot. The stream was so powerful it cut through metal and concrete, and any creature caught in its path was simply torn apart. The biomechanical commander never saw the attack coming. One moment it was directing its forces, the next it was scattered across the room in fragments of metal and organic matter. The other creatures reacted with something that looked like panic, their coordinated movements dissolving into chaotic retreat. Sam didn't waste time celebrating. He moved to his next position, using routes that took him deeper into the colony's foundation levels. The creatures were learning, but they were also growing desperate. Their careful plans were falling apart, and they were beginning to make mistakes. The main communication array was Sam's third target, and by the time he reached it, the creatures had begun to anticipate his methods. They had posted guards at every obvious access point, and were actively hunting for him in the service tunnels. But Sam had one more advantage they couldn't predict. He was willing to go places that no sane person would venture. The colony's waste processing system was a nightmare of toxic chemicals and dangerous machinery that even Sam avoided when possible. But it also provided access to every major system in the facility, including the communication array. Sam pulled on an old-fashioned gas mask and descended into the chemical hell beneath the colony. The waste tunnels burned his eyes even through the mask, and the toxic vapors made breathing difficult despite his protection. But he pushed forward, driven by a grim determination that his alien colleagues had never understood. This was what separated humans from the more civilized species: the willingness to endure any hardship, survive any condition, and fight from any position. When Sam emerged beneath the communication array, he found it guarded by only a few creatures. They had correctly calculated that no rational being would approach through the waste system. But Sam Rivers had stopped being rational the moment these things killed his colleagues and threatened his home. The charges he set in the communication center were larger than the others, designed not just to destroy the equipment, but to bring down the entire structure. When they detonated, the explosion could be felt throughout the colony. The creature's coordination network died with their communication hub, leaving individual groups isolated and confused. But Sam's most important target was still ahead. The main tunnel system that connected the colony to the deep mining shafts was the creature's primary invasion route. They were using it to bring up reinforcements from whatever nest or hive they had established in the planet's depths. If Sam could collapse those tunnels, he could trap the creatures already in the colony and prevent more from reaching the surface. The demolition charges required for such a massive undertaking were beyond what Sam had been able to prepare secretly. Instead, he would have to use the colony's own mining equipment against itself. The industrial explosive charges used for excavation were stored in a heavily armored bunker, designed to withstand accidents. The creatures had captured it early in their assault, apparently recognizing its strategic importance. Sam knew that reaching the explosive storage would be a suicide mission. The area was crawling with creatures and they were now actively hunting for him. But as he prepared for what might be his final assault, Sam felt a strange sense of peace. This was what he had been built for, what 3 years of mockery and condescension had been preparing him for. The aliens had called him primitive, stubborn, and simple-minded. They had compared him to a honey badger as an insult, never understanding that they were describing exactly the kind of creature you needed when civilization collapsed and only raw determination mattered. Sam checked his rifle one last time and headed toward the explosive storage bunker. The colony's survival depended on one stubborn human's willingness to fight dirty, think simple, and never give up. It was time to show these biomechanical invaders what humanity looked like when backed into a corner. Sam emerged from the collapsed tunnel system 3 days after the explosion that should have killed him, looking like something that had crawled out of hell itself. His coveralls were torn and burned, his face was streaked with soot and dried blood, and his hands were raw from clawing through debris with nothing but determination and his grandfather's crowbar. The silence that greeted him as he limped toward the colony's main entrance was profound. No machinery hummed, no voices called out in multiple alien languages, no automated systems announced status updates. Mining Colony 7 looked like a graveyard, its buildings scarred by battle and its corridors empty of life. But as Sam approached the main airlock, faces began to appear at windows. Avian features pressed against reinforced glass, scalar snouts emerged from damaged doorways, and the synchronized movements of hive mind survivors became visible in the shadows. One by one, the colonists who had written him off as a primitive human began to understand what they were seeing. Sam Rivers had walked into the deepest part of the tunnel system with enough explosives to level a mountain. He had deliberately trapped himself with thousands of biomechanical creatures in a maze of collapsing passages and unstable rock formations. And somehow, impossibly, he had survived. Beth Adams was the first to reach him, her administrative composure completely abandoned as she ran across the damaged plaza. Behind her came Dan Cole, moving with the careful gait of someone nursing serious injuries but refusing to show weakness. The alien survivors followed more cautiously, their species' natural wariness overriding their curiosity. Sam, Beth gasped, stopping just short of touching him as if afraid he might disappear. How did you? We saw the seismic readings. The entire tunnel network collapsed. Sam set down his battered tool bag and wiped the worst of the grime from his face with an equally dirty sleeve. Took longer than I expected, he said simply. Those things were tougher than they looked. Dan Cole's military bearing couldn't hide his amazement. The biomechanical creatures, are they? Dead, Sam confirmed. All of them, at least all the ones that made it to the surface. Probably more down in their nest, but they're sealed off now. Won't be bothering anyone for a long time. Trill, the avian engineer who had spent 3 years mocking Sam's primitive methods, approached with her silver feathers dulled by dust and defeat. Her voice carried none of its usual condescension. The tunnel collapse should have killed everything down there, including you. How did you survive? Sam looked at her for a long moment, remembering every dismissive comment, every patronizing suggestion, every time she had implied that human methods were inferior to alien technology. I didn't try to survive, he said finally. I tried to win. The distinction seemed to puzzle the aliens, but Dan Cole understood immediately. You used the collapse as a weapon? The creatures were smart, Sam explained, accepting a bottle of water from Beth and drinking deeply before continuing. They had studied our technology, learned our tactics, prepared counters for everything we might throw at them. But they made one mistake. They assumed I would try to fight them and escape. Ridge, the scalar foreman, slithered closer on his belly, his usual arrogance replaced by something approaching respect. Instead, you trapped yourself with them deliberately. I trapped them with me, Sam corrected. There's a difference. They had numbers, coordination, and superior technology, but they had never faced someone who was willing to die to stop them. Over the next few hours, as the colony's survivors worked to restore basic systems, the full scope of Sam's underground campaign became clear. The biomechanical creatures had controlled the tunnel network for almost a year, establishing a staging area deep beneath the mining operation. They had been systematically studying the colony's defenses, preparing for an invasion that would have wiped out every living being on the surface. Sam had spent 3 days hunting them through collapsed tunnels and unstable caverns, using nothing but simple weapons and an intimate knowledge of underground survival. When his ammunition ran out, he used improvised explosives. When those were exhausted, he used mining tools as weapons. When the tools broke, he used rocks, debris, and his bare hands. The creatures had adapted to energy weapons and sophisticated technology, but they had no defense against someone who refused to follow any predictable pattern. Sam had fought like what he was, a stubborn, resourceful human who would rather die than give up. The thermal imaging from the rescue drones shows the entire nest complex was destroyed, Dan reported, studying data on one of the few functioning display units. Thousands of creatures, maybe tens of thousands. Their entire population center is gone. How did you know where to place the charges? Beth asked. The tunnel network was enormous. Sam pulled out a hand-drawn map, its surface stained with blood and tunnel grime. I followed the water, he said simply. The creatures needed fresh water, same as anything else. Their nest was built around an underground river system. Take out the main flow and the whole complex floods. The aliens studied the crude map with something approaching awe. While they had been relying on sophisticated scanning equipment and computer analysis, Sam had been using techniques that predated spaceflight. He had read the environment like a book written in stone and water, understanding the planet's geology in ways that no scanner could match. Trill spread her wings in a gesture of formal acknowledgement. The Avian Council will want to study your methods. Your approach to threat assessment could revolutionize our defensive doctrines. Your defensive doctrines are fine, Sam replied, shouldering his tool bag. You just need to remember that not every problem can be solved with better technology. Word of Sam's single-handed defense of Mining Colony 7 spread through the galactic communication networks with the speed that only truly extraordinary stories achieve. The account of one human engineer destroying an entire invasion force using primitive weapons and crude tactics became the subject of academic study, military analysis, and no small amount of legend-making. Within months, human advisors were being requested for frontier colonies throughout the galaxy. The species that had spent decades mocking human primitivism suddenly wanted to learn what they called adaptive defense, strategies and low-technology warfare. What they really wanted was to understand how a single human with basic tools could accomplish what their sophisticated military forces could. Not Sam Rivers, meanwhile, returned to his maintenance duties with characteristic stubbornness. He refused interviews, declined military promotions, and turned down lucrative consulting offers. He fixed what was broken, maintained what was working, and prepared for whatever might come next. The alien workers at Mining Colony 7 no longer called him Badger as an insult. Now the nickname carried a weight of respect that bordered on reverence. They had learned that honey badgers were not mocked for being primitive. They were feared for being unstoppable. When new personnel arrived at the colony, they were told the story of the human engineer who had saved them all. They were shown the sealed tunnel entrances where Sam had collapsed an entire underground civilization. They were reminded that sometimes the most advanced solution was to find someone willing to do whatever it took to protect what mattered. Sam himself never spoke of those 3 days underground. When pressed for details, he would only say that he had done what needed doing. But sometimes, late at night when the colony was quiet, he would stand at the observation deck and look down at the sealed tunnels. His hands would unconsciously tighten around whatever tool he was carrying, and his eyes would hold the hard gleam of someone who had looked into the abyss and refused to blink first. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from Mining Colony 7. Never underestimate a species that has survived by being too stubborn to quit, and never ever mock the honey badger, because when everything else fails, that angry little creature might be the only thing standing between civilization and the dark.